The truth can destroy lives. No, that's not a mistake. Sometimes it's the truth, not lies, that destroys everything we've built over years. Because lying isn't just distorting reality. It's our evolutionary shield, a survival strategy that has helped humanity survive until today. Today, we'll dive into the dark waters of deception to find glimpses of truth. About why your brain is programmed to deceive, how to recognize lies even in those closest to you, and why sometimes the truth is the most cruel form of deception. Imagine a cave, dark, damp, illuminated only by the dim light of a fire. Our ancestors sit in a circle, sharing the spoils after a hunt. One of them, let's call him brought less meat than the others. He knows, if he honestly admits he was simply scared of a huge saber-toothed tiger and ran away, he might be expelled from the tribe. So what does do? I tracked a huge beast near the western hill, but it went toward the camp. I decided to warn you rather than chase it. A lie? Yes. Selfish? Absolutely. But it allowed to stay in the tribe, survive, and pass on his genes. Perhaps that's why you're reading this now. Because your DNA is infused with the legacy of those who knew how to lie convincingly enough. Robert Trivers, one of the most influential evolutionary biologists, put it this way: lying isn't just a social strategy, it's an evolutionary mechanism that contributed to the survival of our species. When resources are limited and competition is fierce, the ability to manipulate others' perceptions provides a critical advantage. But there's one nuance that makes you think. For a lie to be effective, we must first deceive ourselves. Yes, we often believe our own lies to lie more convincingly to others. And this is where things get interesting. Have you ever noticed how easily our mistakes are forgotten and how vividly our achievements are remembered? This isn't just selective memory. This is your brain creating a version of reality that allows you to function without hating yourself every minute. Remember the last important conversation that didn't go as planned? Maybe it was a job interview or a conversation with your partner about the future of your relationship. How did you remember it? Most likely, your internal narrative differs somewhat from objective reality. And the more time passes, the more distorted the memory becomes. I didn't say that. She was the first to raise her voice. I offered a compromise, but no one listened to me. Familiar thoughts? Recall the words of the prominent psychoanalyst Carl Jung about the shadow, that part of our psyche that we refuse to acknowledge. Our shadow contains all those instincts, desires, and thoughts that contradict our image of a good person. And to protect our self-esteem, we lie to ourselves about the existence of this shadow. But the paradox is that self-deception makes us more vulnerable to others' lies. When we can't honestly look at our dark sides, we're unable to recognize manipulations aimed precisely at these hidden parts of our personality. Let's conduct an experiment right now. Try to remember the last 24 hours of your life and count how many times you told an untruth. Include everything. I'm almost done with that work, when you haven't even started. I really liked your gift, although it was the 5th cat mug this year. I can't today, I have other plans, when the only plan is to watch a show in bed. Studies show that the average person lies 1 to 2 times a day. But here's the nuance. We don't perceive most of these instances as real lies. We call them white lies, necessary tact, or maintaining social connections. Let's recall the classic experiment by social psychologist Robert Feldman. He videotaped conversations between strangers, then showed participants the recording, asking them to note moments when they were untruthful. The result? People lied an average of 3 times during a 10-minute conversation, often without even realizing it. Imagine this situation. Your colleague asks what you think of their presentation. You know it's terrible, boring, overloaded with information, with unprofessional design. What do you say? A. Honestly, it's a disaster. Redo everything. B. It wasn't bad, but a few points could be improved. C. Cool, I liked it. Most will choose B or even C. And you know what? That's normal. Because truth is like a sharp knife. a useful tool, but one that requires skill to handle, and not always appropriate. Now let's move to the main point. How to understand when someone is lying to you. And here I must disappoint you. Forget about the sure signs of lying from popular articles. No, averting gaze doesn't automatically mean someone is lying. No, nervous finger tapping isn't a guarantee of untruth. Even lie detectors have a large margin of error. Real experts in detecting deception, such as Paul Ekman, who has studied facial micro-expressions for decades, claim the best lie detectors among humans have an accuracy of about 65%. That's barely better than a simple coin flip. But there are certain patterns that increase the probability of detecting deception. Here are the key ones. Inconsistency between verbal and nonverbal signals. When words say one thing, but the body says another. For example, a person claims they're comfortable, but their posture is closed, muscles tense. Excessive detailing or, conversely, critical lack of details. Liars often either try too hard with details to seem more convincing or avoid them, fearing they'll get confused. Emotional reaction inappropriate to the situation. For example, smiling when talking about something sad or an overly dramatic reaction to a minor event. Changes in baseline behavior. This is the most important point. You can't accurately determine if a stranger is lying, but you can notice changes in familiar person's behavior. If a usually open and talkative person suddenly becomes closed and avoids details, that's a signal. Control questions. One of the most effective methods is to ask unexpected questions about details of the story. What was the weather like that day? Who else was there? What clothes was that person wearing? It's difficult for a liar to keep all the details of a made-up story in their head. But most important is context. Lies don't exist in a vacuum. They always have a motive, backstory, and consequences. Remember your last serious suspicion that you were being lied to. What made you doubt? Most likely, it wasn't some specific sign, but a general feeling that something doesn't add up. That's your intuition, the result of processing thousands of micro-signals that the conscious mind can't grasp. Always tell the truth, a noble principle that often does more harm than good. And it's not just about tact. Imagine this situation. Your friend has just completed an important project that she considers her greatest achievement. She shows it to you, beaming with pride. But you see obvious flaws that, in your opinion, make the project mediocre. What's better, to tell the naked truth or support her enthusiasm? The answer is more complex than it seems, because truth isn't just objective facts. It's an interpretation of reality through the prism of subjective experience. Let's consider this through the concept of the prominent philosopher Immanuel Kant. He distinguished between the thing in itself, objective reality, and the thing for us, how we perceive reality. When we tell the truth, we're actually sharing our version of the thing for us, not objective reality. Therefore, sometimes a lie can be closer to deep truth than literal truth. When you tell a sick person, "You'll manage, everything will be fine," this may technically be untrue, you don't know for sure. But on a deeper level, this lie conveys a more important truth. You're there, you support them, you believe in them. But there's another side, toxic truth. This is when truth is used as a weapon to hurt, humiliate, or manipulate. I'm just telling the truth, and if it hurts you, that's your problem. Familiar phrase? This is a classic example of toxic truth. The person uses facts not to inform, but to assert their superiority or express aggression. French philosopher Michel Foucault devoted a significant part of his work to analyzing how truth is used as an instrument of power. Who has the right to determine what is truth? Who has the right to speak it? And to whom? These aren't abstract questions, but real mechanisms of social control. Now let's dive into the darkest corners of the human psyche, where the most dangerous forms of lies are born. Self-justification. Psychologist Carol Tavris, in her book Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me, describes the mechanism of cognitive dissonance. When our actions contradict our values, we don't change our behavior, but begin to justify it by changing our beliefs. Think about the last time you did something that contradicted your principles. Perhaps you lied to someone close, broke a promise, or acted dishonestly in a work situation. What was happening in your head afterward? It was an exceptional case. I had no choice. Everyone does it. It was for her own good. Familiar thoughts? This is self-justification in action, and it's dangerous because it gradually erodes our moral guidelines, making us capable of increasingly serious violations of our own principles. Recall Stanley Milgram's experiment, where ordinary people were ready to administer deadly electric shocks to other participants, actually actors, simply because they were following orders. This is an extreme example of how self-justification can lead to catastrophic consequences. But how to avoid this trap? The first step is awareness. When you hear justifications forming in your head, stop and ask yourself, am I trying to deceive myself? The second step is to develop internal honesty. This doesn't mean being cruel to yourself. On the contrary, it means being brave enough to acknowledge your mistakes and shortcomings without destroying your self-respect. Now it's time for specific tools you can use today. Baseline technique. Before assessing whether someone is lying to you in a specific situation, study their normal behavior. How do they speak when relaxed? What are their gestures? What's their voice tone? This is your baseline for comparison. Indirect questions method. Instead of direct, "Are you lying?" which provokes a defensive reaction, use indirect questions that reveal inconsistencies. Who else was present? I wonder what would John say about this, if John was supposedly there. Clarifying details technique. Ask to detail the story, especially chronology. What happened before this? Did it start raining right after, or did you go to the cafe first? It's difficult for a liar to keep all details of a made-up story in mind. Observing behavior clusters. Don't look for individual signs of lying, but groups of signals that appear simultaneously. For example, a person not just touches their face, which can be normal behavior, but simultaneously avoids details, speaks slower than usual, and changes body posture. Unexpected return to topic technique. After the conversation has moved to another topic, suddenly return to the previous one. By the way, about that meeting you talked about, what was the interior like? An unprepared liar often gets confused in details. But most important, develop your emotional literacy. The ability to understand your own emotions and others' emotions is key to recognizing manipulations and lies. We've come to the most difficult part. How to live with the awareness that lying is an integral part of human nature. That each of us, you and I, daily tell untruths, justify ourselves, and believe in our justifications. The first reaction might be cynical. Everyone lies, so I can too. But this is the path to moral relativism, where any ethical guidelines disappear. The second extreme is trying to be absolutely honest in everything. But as we've already discussed, this can lead to unnecessary cruelty and destruction of social connections. The golden mean is conscious honesty. This means being honest about your own motives. Before telling an untruth, ask yourself, why do I want to lie? Is it self-protection, a desire to help another, or an attempt at manipulation? Consider consequences. Will my truth bring benefit, or only satisfy the desire to be honest? Seek a deeper level of truth. Instead of telling a friend, your performance was terrible, you can find a constructive way of support. You put in a lot of effort and it shows. Let's think together how to make the next performance even better. Establish healthy boundaries. You have the right not to tell everyone everything about yourself. Privacy isn't the same as lying. Philosopher Soren Kierkegaard wrote about the leap of faith, a moment when we must act without having all the answers, relying on our deep values. Similarly, with truth and lies, there are no universal formulas, only our responsibility for choice in each specific situation. We began with a paradox. Sometimes it's the truth that ruins lives. But now we understand a deeper truth. It's not the truth itself that's destructive, but the way we interact with it. Lying is an evolutionary tool that helped us survive as a species. But now, when physical survival is no longer a daily test for most of us, we can use our consciousness to go beyond old evolutionary programs. We can choose when to be absolutely honest and when to find a deeper level of truth that takes into account feelings and needs of others. Perhaps the most important honesty is honesty with oneself, the ability to look into the eyes of our fears, desires, and motives without turning away or making excuses. And here I want to ask, in what situations do you most often lie to yourself? What do you tell yourself, knowing deep down that it's not true? Maybe I'll start on Monday. I'm texting him, her for the last time. 5 more minutes on social media, and I'll get to work. Write in the comments your most frequent lie to yourself and what's behind it. What fear, what need, what desire makes you deceive the closest person, yourself? And I'll be honest with you, your comment can change someone's life, because when we share our truth, we create space where others can find theirs.